Is there any greater pain than seeing a person who was once praised by the whole world, but at the end of his life, quietly pass away without anyone knowing? A mother once cried when she received the body of her son, who had a million-selling album, died coldly in a cheap apartment, without a single relative by his side. Another R&B legend, after decades of standing on stage, was discovered dead for many days, only because the house he lived in was no longer frequented. Fame could not keep them. The love they once gave seemed not to return at the last minute. And if you think that is the end of the pain, then no, the list of 23 black R&B legends who died alone will be revealed below, showing you much more painful truths. 23. The king of R&B died naked behind a locked door. Sam Cooke, 1931-1964. Sam Cooke was not just a singer. He was the voice, the spirit, the hope for millions of African Americans in the 1950s and 1960s. Born into poverty in Mississippi, he grew up listening to church hymns and quickly entered the music scene with a voice as sweet as sugar and as strong as steel. And I help it if I dream of you every night. He took gospel music out of the church and onto the Billboard charts. He was the first black man in the music industry to own his record label, manage his copyrights, and control his income. To conservatives, he was arrogant. To blacks, he was a symbol of self-reliance. But it was his daring to take control of his career and speak out for civil rights that put Sam Cooke in danger. He was watched, censored, and ignored when he needed protection. Behind the spotlight was a man struggling with stress and loneliness. People still remember "A Change Is Gonna Come," the song considered sacred to the civil rights movement. But few people know that Sam wrote it when he was in a state of depression and doubting everything around him. On the night of December 11, 1964, Sam Cooke took a strange woman named Elisa Boyer to the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles. Just a few hours later, he was found dead, naked, lying on the floor, with a bullet in his heart and many bruises on his body. The hotel owner, Bertha Franklin, claimed that she shot him in self-defense when he stormed the room after the other woman cried for help. But the story quickly became a vicious circle. Elisa disappeared afterward. The press reported it in fragments, and the police quickly concluded that he died in self-defense. Many shady details are never explained. Why did Sam, a man always careful about his reputation, go with a strange woman to a cheap hotel? Why did all the valuables he brought with him disappear? Why didn't the press dig deeper into the death of a soul legend at the height of his career? His family didn't believe the investigation. His friends in the music industry didn't believe it. Many believed it was a staged assassination, a warning to any black artist who dared to claim ownership, control, and a voice. Sam Cooke died at just 33. He died alone, under strange circumstances, with his reputation tainted and the truth buried. But his music is eternal. His voice is a haunting reminder of unfulfilled justice. Perhaps being decent means not ignoring unanswered questions. Not remaining silent in the face of loss deserves to be addressed with respect. 22. The stage monster who died in an apartment without a knocker.
Got me high. You got me run hard.
Sugar Pie DeSanto, 1935-2023. Sugar Pie DeSanto was a little hurricane in the flesh. She was barely 5 feet tall, but every time she took the stage, she had the whole band on their toes with every kick, every nod, every fiery scream. She was a living volcano in a time when black women were expected to be gentle, to be reasonable, to stand still. She didn't. She jumped on tables, sang like it was her last time, threw microphones, laughed heartily, and made every stage her home. Born in Brooklyn, raised in San Francisco, Sugar Pie got her start in the West Coast blues movement and quickly became a sought-after name for chess records. She toured with James Brown and burned down recording studios in the South. However, amid her success, Sugar Pie was a woman who suffered greatly. Her only husband died in a terrible fire. The house, full of memorabilia, photos, records, and awards, burned down overnight. She lost everything. After that tragedy, Sugar Pie was no longer invited to perform as often. Music changed. Rebellion was no longer popular. Record labels didn't know what to do with an artist past middle age who refused to conform. She retreated to her old apartment in Oakland, occasionally singing at community festivals, singing with a smile, but everyone knew that smile was tired. In 2023, when neighbors smelled a strange odor coming from her apartment, they called the police. Sugar Pie was found dead a few days ago. No one knew. No newspapers reported it on the first day. No artist spoke out. A stage legend died quietly. No one said goodbye, and no one played any of her songs on the radio. Sugar Pie DeSanto is a testament to a sad truth: the world may love you while you entertain, but it will not miss you when you stop burning. Living a good life starts with not letting those who lit up our youth go without someone bothering to relight a candle, because every stage, even when the lights are out, deserves a final round of applause. 21. The man whose voice was stolen for life. Syl Johnson was one of the most talented artists the American music industry has ever known how to appreciate. Born in Mississippi, he grew up amid dust, poverty, and strict religious indoctrination. But Syl had a voice, and he knew it like no other. He had a way of grinding, of drawing out rhythms, and of blending soul, blues, and funk with such conviction that it was as if he were speaking directly to the heart of the listener. In the late 60s and early 70s, he had memorable hits like Different Strokes, Is It Because I'm Black, and Take Me to the River. But he was never considered to be on the same level as Al Green or Marvin Gaye, despite his talent. Is It Because I'm Black was released in 1969 as the nation was reeling from the assassination of Martin Luther King. It was more than a song. It was the cry, the rage, the sigh of a black man who saw himself excluded from the American dream. But the recording was rejected by many radio stations. White-owned record labels deemed it too political. Syl didn't back down. He released it himself, distributed it himself, and found himself excluded from the mainstream. The bitterness also came from something else. His recordings were later used as samples in hundreds of hip-hop hits: Wu-Tang Clan, Public Enemy, Jay-Z, Kanye West. They used Syl's music without permission. Syl sued. He won a few cases, but winning money did not mean regaining his name. When he appeared on television, people asked, "Who are you?" Syl replied, "I am the shadow that music has forgotten." At the end of his life, he lived alone in a small house in Chicago. No shows, no colleagues, no memoirs, just an old guitar and a deep voice. A neighbor said he still played his music and said softly, "It was me. It was me," as if he was afraid he would forget on his death. In February 2022, the press only mentioned a brief line. There was no Grammy memorial. No one played his songs on national radio. Syl Johnson died in silence. But he lived like a warrior, refusing to bow to the market. He once said, "I don't live to be famous. I live not to be swallowed up." Perhaps living decently is knowing how to look back and calling out the names of those who have been silenced so that no one else has to die again from being forgotten. 20. An angel lost its wings in his own home. Marvin Gaye, 1939-1984. Marvin Gaye was the voice of the African American heart. He was the bridge between soul and politics, between love and protest, between church and street, when he sang "What's Going On." A generation was shocked. When he sang "Let's Get It On," a whole world was excited. But few people knew that behind that sweet voice, like wine, was a rough life, full of cracks from family, faith, and alienation from the people he loved most. Marvin grew up in a strict religious family. His father, the Reverend Marvin Gaye Sr., was quiet, cold, and often used a whip to discipline him. "I don't know if he ever loved me," Marvin once said. "I just know he hated what I became." After his huge success with Motown, Marvin tried to escape his past through music, but the ghosts of his childhood did not let him go. He became addicted to drugs. He suffered from depression. He fled to Belgium. When he returned to the United States in 1983, Marvin was left with nothing, divorced, in debt, and his career in tatters. He moved back in with his parents in Los Angeles, in a 2-story house he had bought for them as a reconciliation gift. But reconciliation never came. On April 1, 1984, after a heated argument, Marvin was shot to death by his father with a gun Marvin had bought for him. He died on the spot. The news shocked the world. But the most painful thing was not that Marvin died, but that he died in his own home, by his closest relatives in a moment that no one could stop. A friend of Marvin's recounted, "A few days ago, Marvin said he was tired, that he didn't want to live anymore if things continued like this. We thought he was just sad for a moment. No one expected it." He died a day before his 45th birthday. No wife, no children by his side, no arms to hug him. Only loneliness surrounded him until the last second. Marvin Gaye left like a forgotten note in his harmony, but the song he left behind will last forever. Perhaps living kindly is learning to listen, not only to the melody, but also to the sobs hidden behind each word, because sometimes the most beautiful cry is the one that the whole world has overlooked. 19. The Smile Stealer Who Disappeared Without a Cause, Major Lance. Major Lance was once known as the smiling face of Chicago soul. He sang not only with his voice, but also with his charm, optimism, and dancing spirit in every movement. In the 1960s, when became a big hit, people thought Major would be the next Marvin Gaye. Born in Mississippi, raised in poverty in Chicago, he struggled to make ends meet from a young age, but he had something no one could teach him, a stage presence that made audiences forget their sorrows. But when the spotlight faded, Major Lance struggled to find his place. Record labels began to ignore him. His close friend, Curtis Mayfield, was busy with his career, and soul music was being swept away by disco, funk, and hip-hop. The Major could not adapt. He tried to make a comeback in the 1980s with a few small shows in Europe, but it was not successful. He began to suffer from eye problems, gradually losing his sight. People no longer saw him smiling. A neighbor said that he once saw Major standing silently in his backyard for a long time, facing the wall, not saying a word. In his final years, Major lived in an old rented apartment in Decatur, Georgia. There was no music, no friends in the industry, no new records. He died on September 3, 1994, so quietly that the local press got the date wrong. There was no public funeral, no memorial service at the Apollo Theater. No one stood up to say the last words for him. Only one daughter in the family recalled, "He made the world smile." But no one asked him if he ever cried alone. Major Lance's lonely death did not come from illness, but from the oblivion of a society that only likes applause and forgets the heart of the artist. He was once a laughing, but he left in a chilling silence. Perhaps we cannot change the past, but we can live more kindly by listening more carefully, by remembering the artists who once made us happy, before they disappeared without a trace. 18. He who prays all his life dies in indifference. Otis Clay. Otis Clay was a soul that did not belong in this world. He was born to sing, but he sang not to be famous, but to heal, with a husky, emotional voice. Otis Clay took audiences from church to studio, from gospel to deep soul, while still maintaining the depth of his soul. He was not flashy, not involved in scandals, not chasing showbiz. He just sang, lived humbly, and prayed with music. Otis grew up in Mississippi and sang gospel as a teenager. He got into soul because he wanted to spread the message of love, not for the money. His song, "Trying to Live My Life Without You," became a soul classic, but he never found the financial success that it deserved. Otis didn't move to Los Angeles. He didn't sign with the big guys. He stayed in Chicago, playing small shows, doing community work, and helping the homeless. But that humility made him forgotten by the music industry. No big awards. No one wrote about him in Rolling Stone when other artists toured the world. Otis sang at a small church on the south side of Chicago. He didn't need the spotlight. A friend said he needed the audience to listen. On January 8, 2016, Otis Clay died of a heart attack. No serious illness, no warning. He had woken up early that morning to prepare for a weekend community performance. But then his heart stopped. No goodbyes, no fuss, just a long silence and a brief headline in the local paper. No tribute at the Grammys, no mention of his name on television. An artist who had spent his life healing others finally passed away without anyone knowing. Otis Clay did not die in pain. He died in peace. But peace does not mean not being alone. He deserved to be known to the world, not because he was famous, but because he was kind. Perhaps that was the greatest lesson he left to live for the community, to love through music, and to walk through life as a silent prayer. We can live like him, not to stand out, just to be real. 17. Carla Thomas, Queen of Silence of Stax Records. In the golden age of Southern soul, the name Carla Thomas was the brightest light of Stax Records. Her clear, sweet voice captivated the audience. Each song, like Gee Whiz or Baby, was the gentle sigh of an entire generation. But few people know that behind that halo is a lonely heart, a tired soul, and a life passed in silent oblivion. Carla is the daughter of artist Rufus Thomas, but it was she who helped bring Stax to the top, after dozens of hits. What the public did not see was her sacrifice. She refused to get married, devoting her youth to music, to the mission of inspiration. But when the record company collapsed, tastes changed, and she almost disappeared from the media. No scandals, no scandals. No one asked how she was doing. A neighbor recalled that Carla once sat quietly in her backyard, listening to an old recording of herself on the radio. Her eyes looked far away, wet, as if she were talking to a world that had forgotten her. There was no grand funeral, no memorial news. When she passed away in 2023, only a small line appeared on a local website. The Queen of Stax left this world in absolute silence, just like the way she lived in the spotlight for decades. Carla didn't need much to shine: a microphone, a heart that loved music, and an audience that knew how to listen. But in the end, what she lacked was exactly that someone to listen. Her story is a reminder that not everyone who dies quietly is of little importance. Sometimes the greatest hearts fall into the scariest oblivion. 16. Marlena Shaw, the last lady of vocal jazz. If there was a voice that made jazz feminine, alluring, and full of personality, it was Marlena Shaw. She stepped onto the biggest stages from Newport to Monterey, sang with Count Basie, and stopped the world with her song California Soul. But no one knew that. Throughout that brilliant journey, she was always a quiet, lonely woman and never really belonged anywhere. Marlena never married for long. She once joked, "The audience is my only faithful lover." But that was what made her fall into a state of emptiness behind the lights. In her later years, when illness came, old friends gradually disappeared, shows became smaller, and Marlena lived alone in an old apartment in Las Vegas. She did not need anyone to take care of her, but that did not mean she did not need anyone by her side. A paramedic once said that Marlena was discovered several days after her death. The apartment was still reverberating with music from an old radio. A record was spinning, her recording of "Woman of the Ghetto." It was bitter that the artist who had used her voice to soothe the loneliness of the world had died in that very loneliness. Marlena's death was not reported on national television. A few colleagues wrote condolences on Facebook, but for most of the world, Marlena Shaw was as if she had never existed. Only those who had heard her sing knew that they had lost a unique soul, an artist who dared to scream in silence. Marlena's passing was not just a loss for music. It was a quiet warning about the price of greatness, that not everyone who shines is remembered, and that sometimes the strongest flames are those that die in the dark. 15. Gwen McCrae, the queen of the dance hall nobody dances with. When disco music exploded, Gwen McCrae was one of the earliest icons to create the ecstatic rhythm of the 70s. The song "Rockin' Chair" not only helped her climb to the top of the Billboard, but also became a symbol of the seductive and profound soul disco genre. Gwen not only possessed a sexy voice, but also brought a powerful performance style that made the stage burn every time she appeared. But then, the times changed. When disco was turned away, Gwen seemed to be swept away from the stage light. After the 80s, she gradually disappeared from the media. Few people knew that she struggled with illness, especially serious complications with her bones and joints that made her unable to walk normally. Gwen's life gradually narrowed down to a small apartment in Florida, where she lived alone, without a partner or children by her side. A neighbor said that in her later years, Gwen would often play old records, sitting for hours listening to herself sing when she was young. She had almost no artist friends to keep in touch with. "I used to make thousands of people dance, but now no one remembers me," she once exclaimed in a rare conversation with a local journalist. In 2022, she passed away quietly. There was no grand funeral. No famous artists came to see her off. A woman who had captivated the world with her music had to leave the world in a heartbreaking loneliness. Gwen's story is a painful testament to how quickly the spotlight can be turned off. and how those who were once the most loved are sometimes the loneliest at the end of the road. Let's look to her story to remind us, don't forget those who touched your heart through music. They deserve to be remembered, not just when they were on stage, but when they couldn't get up again. 14. Millie Jackson, the most outspoken woman who was the loneliest. Millie Jackson was one of the rare artists who dared to say things that black women were not allowed to say at that time. She shocked America with her frank, raw, and humane recordings like Caught Up and Fuck You Symphony on stage. She was a whirlwind of words, a defiant and seductive image of feminism, but behind the laughter and sarcasm, there was a woman who fought to be understood, and in the end, no one was there to listen. Millie was married and had children, but her private life was a series of struggles. She once shared in an interview, "I always told people, but no one listened when I was weak." After retiring from the stage in the late 2000s, Millie chose to live a reclusive life, without social media or contact with her colleagues. Her daughter lived in another state, and her life consisted of a small room with old bookshelves, a few vinyl records, and unsent letters. In 2023, people discovered that she had been dead for a few days in a small house in Georgia. A local newspaper wrote Millie Jackson, the symbol of rebellion, died quietly. There was no lavish memorial service. No major artist stood up to hold a farewell ceremony. Her death was a wake-up call to the entertainment industry that once applauded her, but then quickly turned away when she was no longer shining. Millie once said, "I don't need people to cry for me. I just need them to remember what I said." But the truth is, Millie deserved more than that, not just to be remembered, but to be understood and loved. Let her story make us wonder, are we forgetting those who dared to live, and if one day they were silent? Would anyone be quiet enough to listen to their last words? Thank you for following 10 heartbreaking stories, but that's only half the sad picture of the music industry that applauded when they shined and then turned away when they fell. What's wrong with the way society treats those who touched a generation? Are we too forgetful? Or is it the system that chose to throw them away? Keep reading to the end, and you'll see that loneliness can be hidden even behind the songs that once shook America. 13. The genius who sang through his pain and died from it, Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway needs no introduction. Just one line from A Song for You or Someday We'll All Be Free tells us how deep his soul is. He is more than just a singer. He is a gifted composer, pianist, and a symbol of a black soul finding its way in a broken world. But that artistic light is always accompanied by darkness. Donny suffers from schizophrenia. He hears voices in his head, doubts his family, friends, and the music he creates. On January 13, 1979, Donny was found fallen from the 15th floor of the Essex House Hotel in New York. The police ruled it a suicide, but those close to him did not believe it. He had just signed a contract for a new project with Roberta Flack. The rehearsal before was still full of emotion. A hotel employee said that Donny looked very tired but alert. Was there something going on in that room? Something beyond comprehension? Donny Hathaway died at the age of 33. Too short a life for such a great soul. Perhaps the most painful thing was not that he fell from a building, but that he fell into silence for so long that no one could catch him. Being kind can be as simple as listening when someone says they are tired, and never take an artist's silence as a sign of stability. 12. The girl sang like an angel, then collapsed in front of the microphone. Linda Jones. Linda Jones was a phenomenon. Her voice was soaring, powerful, and haunting, as if her soul had lived through centuries of melancholy. She was only 21 when Hypnotized captivated millions of R&B lovers, but behind that light were days of Linda living with severe diabetes, a disease that, at that time, medicine was not sophisticated enough to control. In 1972, during a recording session at a Newark studio, Linda felt dizzy and tired. She asked to rest in the car to take a nap. A few hours later, when her manager returned to call, Linda was no longer breathing. She had fallen into a coma due to low blood sugar and died right there, in an old car, with no relatives by her side. She was only 27 years old. No one thought that a young person, at the peak of her career, like Linda, would leave so suddenly. No accident, no scandal, just a fragile body that could not keep up with the demands of her career. and an industry that never asked her, "How are you?" Linda Jones left like a silent wind, but if you have ever heard her sing, you will understand. It was an unforgettable voice. Being kind sometimes starts with asking people what they need, instead of just asking them to shine for you. 11. Zulema Kuso, the voice left behind in the stream of indifference. Zulema Kuso was once considered a different light in the soul scene of the 70s, born in 1947 in Florida. She entered music with a strong belief that her sincere voice would find its way to the hearts of the audience. A former member of the group Faith, Hope, and Charity, Zulema went solo with a rare soul disco sound at that time, but despite her talent, she never achieved great commercial success. Amid her unstable career, she was abandoned by the market, record labels turned their backs on her, and her name gradually disappeared from the big stages. A former colleague recalled that in the last meeting, Zulema simply said, "People love my singing, but no one loves me." She continued to perform at local churches, refusing the big lights to maintain her dignity. In 2013, she passed away quietly in Tampa. No press, no media, no big funeral. A single neighbor reported that they found her lying on the sofa, the TV still on, next to a stack of old cassette tapes where she had recorded her voice. There are many talented people, but they lack the time to be understood, and when they disappear, the world only realizes that they have left a void that no one else can fill. Living kindly is not only loving those who are shining, but also not abandoning the souls who are quietly burning without anyone knowing. 10. Minnie Riperton, the angel who has a voice but doesn't have a chance to live long. Minnie Riperton, born in 1947, is one of the rare singers with a 5-octave vocal range who moved the world with the immortal hit Lovin' You. She sang backing vocals for Rotary Connection, then was sponsored by Stevie Wonder when she went solo, but her stardom was short-lived. In 1976, at the height of her success, she discovered she had terminal breast cancer. Minnie continued to perform, record, and even smile brightly on television shows despite having only one breast. But as her disease progressed, many showbiz stars turned their backs on her. Audiences began to forget her. She gradually withdrew from the stage. In the last month of her life, Minnie lived in a small apartment in Los Angeles, with only her husband and 2 close friends taking turns caring for her. One of them said that the night before she died, Minnie sang softly a never-before-released verse, "I'll wait for you in silence." She died in 1979 at the age of 31. The news of her death appeared in the press in just a few lines, amid a myriad of news stories. But for those who heard her sing, her death was a painful reminder that sometimes the world is not big enough for souls too fragile. To be kind is to know how to listen to a weak voice before it dies, and to know how to appreciate those who don't need applause, just a heart that flutters when they sing. 9. The warrior who no one waits for at the end of the road, Ruby Andrews. Ruby Andrews entered the 60s with a powerful voice and unmistakable charisma. The hit "Casanova, Your Playing Days Are Over" made her famous, becoming an icon of a strong black woman who dared to speak out about love and betrayal, but after a few years of success, Ruby gradually disappeared from the media radar. Record labels changed strategies. The soul style she was loyal to was considered outdated. Ruby did not change, and she was left behind. In the years that followed, Ruby lived alone in a small house in Chicago. No complaints, no voice. A neighbor said she still sang in her garden from time to time, as if music was the only place she could be heard. She died in 2021 in silence. No funeral news was broadcast. No memorial service was held. Ruby died as she had lived for 40 years after her peak, quietly, but proudly. Don't let those who once gave you strength die as if they never existed. Living well means stopping and remembering their names just one more time. 8. The Woman of the Rain and a life of cold wetness behind the lights, Ann Peebles. Ann Peebles was one of the most distinctive voices in Memphis soul. "I Can't Stand the Rain" not only brought her to the top, but was also called by John Lennon the best song about rain. She stood out in a world full of men, a symbol of sophistication and emotional depth, but after her great success in the 70s, Ann quietly withdrew. A stroke left her unable to perform as she once did. She chose silence over explanation. Many people did not know that she still lived in Memphis with her husband in a modest house. They would occasionally see her go to the supermarket alone, wearing a hat and sunglasses, and no one would recognize her. When she died in 2023, the press barely mentioned it. A person who had topped the charts now quietly left the world as someone who had never been on the stage of life. Anne's story is proof that not everyone is absent because they want to be. Sometimes they are forced to withdraw because the world is not kind enough to keep them. 7. The goddess of disco disappeared in a dance hall without music. Linda Clifford. Linda Clifford was a shining symbol of the disco boom. Once a Miss Chicago, then a singer, then an actress. Her voice in If My Friends Could See Me Now or Runaway Love was an image of fun, light, and a vibrant dance floor. But when disco died out in the early 80s, Linda, like a series of artists of the time, fell into a void of indifference. She did not follow new trends. She stayed with the music she believed in. But the market had long since abandoned her. In her later years, she lived quietly in Atlanta, occasionally teaching voice lessons to young students. One student said that when she sang just one line, the whole room stopped breathing, but no one came back to pay her respects. When she passed away in early 2024, only a few small newspapers mentioned her. A legend of the disco scene died as if the lights had gone out decades ago. Linda Clifford teaches us that some people never change to be loved more. They just stay true to themselves and wait for the world to turn around. But sometimes, the world never does. 6. The black rose is beautiful to the point of sadness and blooms alone. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman was a rare combination of beauty, depth, and unspoken sadness. She possessed a deep, soulful contralto voice that resonated like the heart of a modern black woman trying to find a way to be kind in a world that was not kind to her. She sang with Norman Connors, was nominated for a Tony Award, and touched the hearts of millions with You Know How to Love Me. But beneath the aura was a woman who battled depression and loneliness every day. On June 30, 1995, just hours before she was due to perform at the Apollo Theater, Phyllis left a suicide note and overdosed on sleeping pills in her New York apartment. "I just don't have the strength to continue living in this world," she wrote in the note. "We thought she was just running late," a backstage worker recalled, but no one expected it to be her last night. Phyllis's death is a reminder that beautiful souls are often the most vulnerable. Kindness can start with listening to silent sorrows before they become permanent. 5. A faint voice but a bright heart. Nolan Porter. Nolan Porter didn't have many hits, but among true soul enthusiasts, he was a diamond in the rough. His song If I Could Only Be Sure became a legend in the UK, but in the US, where he was born, Nolan's name is barely mentioned. He was once married to Candia Ross, the daughter of legendary musician Frank Zappa. But his life passed quietly, without scandal, without rebellion, only silent dedication. In the last years of his life, Nolan lived in the darkness of memories and old studios. He passed away in 2021 without any media coverage. No artists posted public condolences. A friend recounted that, in his last year, Nolan still kept the habit of carrying a pen. He always said, "Who knows? Maybe someone wants to hear a song." He passed away like his career light, without a sound. But that did not make him any less memorable. Living kindly is seeing the value in people who do not need the spotlight, as long as their hearts are still bright. 4. The man the world forgot in the middle of a good song. Garland Green. Garland Green is a fleeting but profound phenomenon. The 1969 hit Jealous Kind of Fella brought him to the top quickly. But instead of being supported, he was controlled and exploited by the record companies. Despite having attended college and having his vision in composing, Garland was forced to sing commercial love songs, lost his creative rights, and gradually disappeared from the public. For decades after that, he performed at small stages, tea rooms, fairs, or the private studios of acquaintances. A middle-aged audience recalled, "I once saw him sing in front of only 12 people, but he still sang as if it was a fateful night." In 2023, he passed away in silence, without a big farewell, and no one mentioned his name in cultural news. Garland Green is proof that artists are forgotten by the system, not because they are bad, but because they are not allowed to continue. Perhaps Living a decent life is learning to clap for a song, even when everyone has stood up and turned their backs. 3. A woman who sang about love and lived her whole life without being loved fully, Barbara Mason. Barbara Mason once made the whole of America sob with Yes, I'm Ready, an innocent but tearful love song. She was an icon of soul ballads in the early 70s, possessing a voice as gentle as a whisper in the night. But behind the stage lights was a woman who lived a private life, without scandals, without tricks, and no one held her back when she quietly withdrew. She lived alone until the end of her life in a small house in Philadelphia. No honors, no comebacks. When Barbara passed away in 2023, there were only a few short messages on social media. An old friend said she wrote about love all her life, but few people asked her if she was lonely. Perhaps living kindly is knowing how to stop and remember those who sang to us with all their hearts. 2. The Queen has no throne and no one was there to watch her fall, Betty Wright. Betty Wright is the voice that makes every black woman stronger after every betrayal. With Clean Up Woman, she became the voice of a generation. Success came early, but Betty did not choose to live in the limelight. She worked hard, trained young artists, and supported the community. But the light of fame no longer shone on her in her later years. She quietly fought cancer without many people knowing. When Betty passed away in 2020, many people were surprised that she was still alive. An artist she had supported wrote, "She used to make everyone shine, but no one helped her when she faded. The biggest lesson is, don't wait until someone dies to appreciate them." A golden voice lives its entire life in a quiet room, Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross is the definition of pure R&B. He didn't need choreography. He didn't need to break the rules, just one note to make people's hearts melt. He won 8 Grammys, sold tens of millions of records, and was a fixture at every American wedding, party, or long lonely night. But Luther never married. He avoided the press. He lived alone. After a stroke in 2003, he barely appeared in public. In 2005, he passed away quietly at home, leaving no spouse, no children. Only his music still resonates. A colleague once said Luther always knew how to make people feel loved, but no one knows if he was ever truly loved. Perhaps being kind means learning to love those who make the world feel gentle before they are gone. Many of the legends we once loved passed away quietly, not because they were weak, but because they lived in a world that was not gentle enough to hold them. Don't be so quick to judge what you haven't experienced. Live more slowly, be kinder, and look at others with compassion, not with invisible demands. We truly appreciate every moment you spend remembering the legends who died alone. If these stories resonate with you, please like, share with your loved ones, and comment with the names of the artists you hold dear to your heart.